So there was a psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Eric Burns, and he said you have a structure to your personality. The reason we act and behave and communicate the way we do has everything to do with the makeup of our personality. Anyone heard of the concept of nature and nurture? Depending on how you're raised, that nurturance, that experience, the relationships, the parenting, the teachers, the role models you have contribute to how we develop to that personality. Now, by understanding this whole concept, it answers three really important questions. Question number one, who am I? Who am I as a personality? What is the structure I'm made out of? Which answers or brings up question number two. Why do I behave and communicate and act the way I do? Why is it in this situation I can hold it together, but in this situation with this personality I fall apart? And number three, where did I develop these habits from? And by understanding this, we can start to now affect how we're showing up in our interactions. The other side of this is we have a lot of responsibility with our personality to train it, to coach it, to manage it, to improve it. Not because we're completely dysfunctional, but it has a lot to do with how we show up and how we manage and once again, spouse and parent. So Dr. Burns said your personality is made up of three main areas. The names we're using are to describe behavior. And Burns said the first side of your personality, every single person in the room, has what is known as a parental state. Not because you have kids. The name parent to describe behavior. If I said, you know what, you remind me of my father, or you remind me of my mother, and you've just met me, you go, I kind of get what he's talking about. Because you have your own reference for what that behavior and that sort of communication would look like. Now, the other side to our personality, and this is where it all goes wrong, ladies and gentlemen, is we have something called the child side to our personality. And what anchors us in the middle, what sort of gets us sort of managing this stuff is something called the adult. So we have three sections to our personality. Now, these different sides of our personality we're going to call ego states. So we have a parental ego state to our personality. You have an adult ego state to your personality. And you have a child side to your personality. Let's talk about parental behavior. There are two main parental styles. So we have our authoritarian, directive, sort of more forceful parent. We call this the critical parent side to your personality. We all have a critical parent side to our personality. And again, depending on our background and upbringing and experiences, have determined how we've developed to this side of the personality. Because with every ego state, there's a range. There's a low, medium, and a high. Now let's just spend some time with the critical parent. Many years ago, we worked with a company and they called us. We said, what do you need? And they said, we need supervisory and management training. And we said, why? Why? What's going on? It was a car manufacturer. They said, one of the line supervisors got stabbed in the parking lot. Oh, interesting. How did this happen? Well, the line supervisor, the way they speak and the way they talk to people on the line and the way this and that, and I have the white hat and you have the blue hat and blah, 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 blah. Eventually, the other human being snapped. Right? Now, we understand this from a place of psychology. It's not rocket science. It's not confusing on why that happened. The question comes down to is what can we do to avoid these things from happening? How can I be effective in my communication? Now, the opposite was, you said, the gentle parent. I think this is probably in the world today, right? Everyone's too damn gentle, right? But we call this technically the nurturing parent. Which, if I was to think about my parents when I grew up, my mother was the nurturing parent. I got away with blue murder, right? Made me feel warm and fuzzy afterwards. And my father reminded me how he was going to take me out every time I got home. Let's jump down to the child. The child state to your personality is three sides. There's only 3 points of emotion. That's it. You can boil all emotion down to these 3 points. The withdrawn child, also known as the sulking child. A happy child, happy little Johnny, right? Always so happy. We call this the spontaneous child. And then finally, so we got the happy child. This is also known as the most natural child, spontaneous, the withdrawn, and anger. Absolutely. Original name for this is the reactionary child, but this is what we call the angry child. Now, we all have these 3 states to our personality. And what's interesting about the child side of our personality is this is a side of our personality that activates when we are stressed. This is why when people become defensive, one of the first things you got to appreciate is they didn't start the interaction defensively. All right? It was our interaction with them that created that. And that's where it's really shitty. Because I said to you, after today, you could no longer get away with the concept of, I don't know why that happened. You go, man, my delivery was critical parents about safety. I hammered on them. They happened to flip into angry child. All right. Let's talk about the adult ego state. The adult ego state is the rational, logical, intelligent, functional, mature, emotional regulation comes from the adult side of your personality. Right. And what we're aiming for in effective communication is what we call adult-to-adult transactions. I got to come talk to you about health and safety and process and machines and incidences and results and commitment. The person I want to have that conversation with is the adult. Because whether I'm talking about a severe or difficult or important type of topic, the best person to be able to receive that, the best side of their personality, is the adult. And it is my responsibility to create the adult-to-adult transaction. It's your responsibility to communicate in a way which draws out their adult in order to have the adult-to-adult. That's the hardest part about this. Because when you're in the child ego state, or you're in that critical parent ego state, and you want to go have that conversation, right? That's where it all starts to go wrong. We could choose how we show up in these scenarios by understanding which ego state is the best for the job. So we look at the adult being the token pinnacle ego states, right? The rational, logical one, the one that seeks information, shares information, speaks about and thinks about the objective, argues in a neutral way, looks to problem solve and resolve. Where does this actually get out of hand? The super adults, the problem with them is they miss the opportunity to connect with another human being because we're so robotic. Someone comes in and I say, "How was your weekend?" They're like, a little bit rough. We had to put our dog down this weekend. We're like, "Oh, okay. Are you ready to start the meeting?" So the first line on the item is X, Y, and Z. Right? And what do you think that other person's doing? We're like, "Whoa, I just shared something." And this person just glaze right over it because they don't see emotion. They don't empathize. So the absence or the super adult, the problem with it is besides not seeing emotion, also analysis paralysis. We overthink things. We get caught up in the details. I don't make decisions. I'm crossing the T's and dotting the I's too much. I'm measuring 19 times to cut once. Delayed decisions. Those are the two main negative things from the super adult. Here are 4 things that I want you to consider about answering and doing when it comes down to these scenarios. Number 1, the first thing I want you to think about is asking yourself this question: what do I want? And what we're thinking about here is what's the outcome to the interaction right now? Okay, going to sit down, going to have this conversation. Could be with your spouse, could be with your kids, could be with a contractor, could be with the neighbor, could be with the property owner. What's the objective? So by the end of this conversation, what are we walking out with? Are we walking out with a commitment to follow a process? Are we walking out with a better understanding of what to do next time? Are we walking out with agreements? By the end of this conversation, what's the outcome we're going for? It's number 1. Number 2, we're going to ask ourselves a question: who am I? What's your name? Josh? Yeah, my name's Josh. I like this kind of music. These are my hobbies. These are my sports, right? I play hockey with the boys each week. Not that. Which ego state is Josh? Right? And not which ego state you need to be, because we know we need to be the adult. What ego state is naturally driving me in the moment? And in most cases, you're going to find it's one of the child ego states or your critical parent. Some of the nurturing parents kick in as well, but that could be problematic as well, because the person might not take things so seriously. Number 2, who are they? What ego state am I? Who are they? Which is which ego state that I'm dealing with. So if I've got an angry child sitting in front of me, what rule do I need to go back to? Who am I? Now, by the way, just because you ask a question and you try to approach us nicely doesn't mean people automatically become the adult. Some people, you got to work a little harder, right? You got to keep that interaction going. You got to, what we call, hold the line of the adult, right? Because people respond as treated works against you as well. So when I'm poking those buttons in you, it's going to be really hard for you to not feel that pinch. We all have triggers. And I know it's 2024 and the entire woke narrative is like, I'm triggered by this, right? Not that trigger, all right? We go through experiences which hook us. The way someone said something, the situation, right? Just the emotion. And finally, the rule is ask, don't tell. come up with the questions that we might want to use in order to support our objective.